Hey you guys, what's up? I am super excited about today's video. Today's video is actually a collab with Alana, who is Classy on the Run here on YouTube. I'm sure some of you guys are already subscribed to her YouTube channel. I'm gonna have it linked in my description box below, so make sure you guys go and check that out. In today's video, we're gonna be doing our top 5 Colourpop palettes. I'm gonna be doing a little bit of a twist with mine. I'm gonna be doing my top 5 Colourpop palettes if I could only keep 5. So this list might be a little bit different than whenever I do my Colourpop palette ranking video, because I am planning on doing a ranking video with all of my Colourpop palettes. I do have some of my favorites in this video, so this top 5 might be similar to the top 5 that I'm going to do when I rank all of my palettes, but I went through all of my palettes and I wanted to make this video if I could literally only keep 5 palettes, so I kind of have a little bit of everything if these are the only 5 Colourpop palettes that I had in my collection. So I hope you guys are all excited about today's video. Make sure you guys go and subscribe to Alana's channel and watch her video as well. I'll have that also linked in my description box below, and then of course I'll have all 5 of these palettes linked there for you guys if you want to check any of them out. If you guys are excited about today's video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So coming in at number 5, we have the High Tide palette. I wanted to include this palette in my top 5 palettes if I could only keep 5, because this is a monochromatic palette of all like blues and teal shades. I realized that once I was going through all of the palettes of the top 5 that I would keep, I didn't have like any blues in the other palettes, so I thought it was really important to pick a palette that had blues in it, because I feel like I use blues in a lot of different looks if I'm trying to do like a colorful look, and this one has all of like the most perfect teal shades in it, and the quality of these is amazing. The mattes are very pigmented, they blend beautifully, and then the shimmer shades in here are gorgeous. I really like this palette. I'm not sure if this one would be in like my top 5 favorite, like all-time favorite palettes of Colourpops, but if I could only keep 5 palettes, this one would definitely be in my top 5. I think this is a great palette. All of these shades, as I said, perform beautifully, and yeah, I really like the packaging of this one as well. Like, I just think this is so cute. I love the packaging of this one. This is one of those palettes that I've really liked all of the looks that I've created. I'll kind of insert some pictures of a look, or I'm not sure how many I've done with this palette so far, but I really like the looks that I've created with this palette, and yeah. So yeah, this would be in my top 5 if I could only keep 5, so kind of think about this list as if the next one, whenever I do the 4th, if I could only keep 4, this one would not be in the top 4, obviously, because this was the 5th palette, but yeah, this one would definitely be in my 5 that I would keep. I just really like this color story, and these are the kind of blues that I would go for anyway. I kind of like more teal blues in general. They're kind of like bluish green shades. So yeah, I really like this palette, and I would definitely be keeping this one. So coming in at number 4, we have the It's All Good palette. This is one of their 30 pan eyeshadow palettes. I feel like this is such an underrated palette. I'm like obsessed with this color story. This is definitely a color story that I gravitate towards. You guys know that I love like pink toned eyeshadows, and I decided to keep this one in my top 5 if I could only keep 5 because of all of the pinks and the yellows. I just think this is such a pretty palette, especially for the summertime. I really enjoy this palette a lot. I feel like you can create like the perfect kind of like sunset eye look with this palette. It does have some pressed glitters in this palette, which I am not the biggest fan of, but these 2 pressed glitters in here, which are this shade and this shade, I actually think are really pretty. They're probably some of my favorite pressed glitters in any of my Colourpop palettes that I have. I actually use those a lot whenever I do eyeshadow looks with this palette. If I have some Instagram looks that I've done with this palette, I'll put them on the screen for you guys to see, but I just think this is such a gorgeous palette. I feel like there is the perfect amount of mattes and shimmers in this palette. It has a good mix of both. We have mattes, metallics. I believe there are some satins in here. We have some of the mattes with the glitters. We have pressed glitters. I just feel like all around this is a really great palette, and I would definitely have to keep this one. Obviously, if I could only have 5 palettes, this palette to me just like screams summertime, and I just feel like people don't talk about this palette enough. I've always really enjoyed this palette, and I never understood why more people didn't talk about this one. I just think this is a really great palette, and I also think it's one of their best 30 pan palettes. So yeah, I love this palette, and I highly recommend it. I almost like cleaned my Colourpop palettes for you guys for this video, but then I was like, no, I'm just gonna keep them all super dirty, because obviously you guys can tell that these are probably like my most used palettes, so I'm not gonna clean them for this video. So just get ready to see some really dirty palettes. This one is not as dirty pretty as some of the other ones, but yeah, I really enjoy this palette and I highly recommend it. So coming in at number 3, we have the Colourpop What Dreams Are Made Of palette from the Lizzie McGuire collection. I am literally obsessed with this color story. I think this is such a beautiful palette. This one I would have to keep in my top 5 if I could only keep 5 because I love the greens and purples in this palette. I feel like this is such a unique color story. I always want to grab for this palette. I actually love how all of these shades kind of look together if you did a look with literally all of these. This is another palette that I've loved, like all of the looks that I've created with it. I reach for this palette so often. I just think this is such a beautiful color story, and I even love the shades that have glitter in them, like the matte shades that have glitter. Normally I don't really like those shades, but the ones in this palette, like these two right here, I really like both of these shades even though they have glitter. These are a matte with some specks of glitter in them, and I have learned from you guys that the glitter is actually supposed to help with the blending. So whenever you do blend these shades, the glitter does kind of like go away, if that makes sense. Like there is a little bit of a sheen still, but for the most part it doesn't look like glittery on the eye. It does kind of blend out. This is definitely probably one of my favorite Colourpop palettes, so this will probably be in like my top palettes when I do my full ranking video because I just am obsessed with this color story. I could do without the pressed glitter in this palette. You guys know I'm not the biggest fan of pressed glitters, but I actually don't mind it. I do think it is a pretty shade. It's a nice shade that you could kind of use as like a topper just all over the lid. But yeah, this palette is beautiful. I love like literally every single shade in here, so I could not go without my Lizzie McGuire palette. I think this is one of the best like collections that they've done in quite a while. So now we are at number 2. So the palette that I am putting in second is the Stone Cold Fox palette. This is probably not a surprise to you guys. I love this palette so much. I literally use it like every single day. This palette is like the perfect everyday palette. I decided that I had to keep this one in my top 5 if I could only keep 5 because this palette is split into like 3 sections and you kind of have everything that you really need for everyday looks. We have like a rosy toned section, we have your gray section, which is perfect for like a smoky eye, and then a more cool toned or like neutral side of the palette. I just think that overall this is one of the best Colourpop palettes that they have. This is also one of the best 30 pan palettes that they have. I think this palette is just so beautiful. It's literally like the perfect everyday palette. If you are someone who doesn't really like warm toned shades, which are in a lot of everyday palettes, I feel like a lot of like kind of like basic everyday palettes are mostly warm toned shades, and I personally really like cool toned or neutral shades for everyday looks. That is why I reach for this palette so often. This palette also has the perfect amount of mattes and shimmer shades. This one does not have any pressed glitter in it. So if you guys are not big into pressed glitters, you will love that this palette does not have any in it. It literally has like every single shade that you would need to create a daytime look, a nighttime look, a smoky eye, a rosy toned eye. I just feel like overall this is one of the best Colourpop palettes out there, and I definitely would have to keep it if I could only keep 5 Colourpop palettes. So yeah, this is just an amazing palette and I cannot recommend it enough. I feel like a lot of people talk about this palette and they talk about it for good reason. It's just an amazing palette. So yeah, this palette is my palette that came in at number 2. So now we are at the number 1 spot. I'm sure this is not going to be a surprise to you guys, like at all. I'm sure it won't surprise anyone, but this would be like the one palette if I could only keep like one palette. If I could only keep one Colourpop palette, and this is like my top Colourpop palette, this will probably be the number 1 in my ranking video. I'm not sure. We'll have to see. Make sure you guys stay tuned for that video. But it is the Colourpop Bare Necessities palette. As I said, I'm sure you guys are not surprised at all. I think this is like the best Colourpop palette. I use this so often. It is kind of similar to Stone Cold Fox, but it is the more like warm toned version of that palette. This is like the perfect everyday palette. There are some like kind of neutral shades in here as well. So if you're not super big into like only warm toned shades, they do have some other shades in this palette that you could use as well. But for the most part, this is more warm toned than the last palette. I use this palette all the time. If I'm going somewhere and I want my eyeshadow to be like the perfect kind of like natural, neutral glam, I'm not sure how I'm going to describe that, or a little bit warm toned, this is the palette that I'll reach for. We have like the orangey warm tone shades. We have some pinky rosy shades. We have our dark browns, a black. I just feel like overall this is an amazing palette. You can create more like natural everyday looks, but you can also create like darker, smokier looks as well with this palette with these shades over here. The quality, of course, is amazing. This is definitely the best 30 pan Colourpop palette that they have. It's just an amazing palette. There are also no pressed glitters in this palette. You guys know how I feel about those pressed glitters, so I'm so glad that they did not include any in these last two palettes. So yeah, if I could only keep two Colourpop palettes, these would be the two that I would keep. These are always in my bathroom because I use both of these every day, depending if I want more of like a cool tone look or a warm toned look. This one is just such an amazing palette. I feel like I need to buy a backup of both of these palettes because these are just looking rough and I could literally not go without these in my collection. These are some of my favorite palettes of all time. So yeah, this would have to be the palette that is in the #1 spot. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you guys could only keep 5 Colourpop palettes, which ones would you keep? As I said, if I could only keep 2, it would be these. If I could only keep 3, these 3. If I could only keep 4, these 4, and then of course we have all 5. I'd have to include that blue palette. These are the palettes that I feel like if I had only these in my collection, I could create like every kind of look that I would want to. I don't know, I just feel like this is a really great mix of colors. We have like warm toned neutral shades for every day, cool tone shades, then of course the blues that I mentioned because I like to use blues in my looks, and then this one has our purples, greens, and then this one's like the perfect kind of like sunset eye, which has like pinks, yellows, and some purples in here. So yeah, those are the top 5 Colourpop palettes if I could only keep 5. I hope you guys all enjoyed this video. Make sure you guys go and check out Alana's video as well. I'm really excited to see her picks. So if you guys did enjoy today's video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. Also, make sure you guys have your notifications turned on, that way you don't miss out on any of my future videos. All you have to do is click the bell next to the subscribe button, and then you'll receive a notification every time I upload a new video. And I will see you guys in my next video. Thank you so much for watching.